All right, friends, we did it. This is week 8, lecture 3. This is our last one. I am sad. Insert teardrop. The good kind, though, not like the tattoo, because whatever. But really, really excited for your next future, for what you guys are doing, where you're going. But this is our last one. So this is unfortunately our last time to be together. You guys have been such a great class. Thank you for your kindness, especially last week when I had a really, really challenging week. So thank you for your kindness. You guys have been such a great class, one of my favorites for sure. And I don't just say that. You're probably like, oh, he says that to everybody. I genuinely know you guys have been fun and engaging and have helped me become a better instructor just by talking and asking questions and asking challenging questions. It's been really, really, really fun. So just want to say thank you for that. It's really just been a pleasure to be your instructor over these last 8 weeks. Can you believe we've been together for 2 months? That's crazy. Um, just a couple housekeeping. Discussion questions are over. Core assignments are over. You don't have to hear me saying anything else. You guys did it. You are moving forward. You have crushed it. You should give yourselves a pat on the back. You guys are amazing, and you did it. And I was talking to some students yesterday, and I know I kind of hit on it again, so I'm not going to go on a soapbox, but I always encourage students, especially the last days, look back on first day and what you knew. And going into it in week 3 when you were really challenged, and week 4, because that's when stuff gets really, really hard. And you're like, I don't know if I can do that. Or if you ever had that thought, hopefully you didn't, right? Hopefully you did. But like if you had that, that's very normal. Just looking back on what you've accomplished, I think you should be very, very, very proud. This is very hard. I told Gray this when she was my student way back in the day. And I was told this when I was a student. I'm gonna cuss a little, so I'm sorry. Is one day we were all really, really challenged, and it's like, this is hard. I'm exhausted. I'm in my third stack. It feels like And our instructor sat with us, and he was kind. He's no longer at Coding Dojo, but he's the goat. And he's like, hey, no shit. This is hard. That's why you get paid a lot of money. That being said, you can do it. I believe in you, and I see your effort. And if you keep having effort and you keep showing up and you keep focusing on progress and not perfection, you will accomplish this. And so I just say that as you guys are moving forward, as you're moving into maybe you're another stack, if you're going to Java, if you're going to projects and algorithms, if you get that moment, remember you can do this. Look at all you've accomplished in the last 8 weeks, 16 weeks, 20 weeks, 22 weeks, like whatever you did, right? In the last very long time, you've accomplished so much. So please be very proud of yourself if you can, if you have the means or whatever. Like treat yourself to something this weekend. Just do a little win, whether that's getting a slice of pie from your favorite restaurant, or going out to eat, or just sitting and binge watching Selling Sunset on Netflix. I don't know. Just do something for yourself, something that, because you got to celebrate yourself, especially in the hard moments. So, again, way to go. You did it. Really, really proud of all of you guys. What's next? Just a little bit of business. So you have either projects and algorithms. We call it P&A here. So if I say P&A, it's projects and algorithms. But it should be P and A, but I think I do P and A. Sorry, I just realized that. Or if you go to Java, you'll get an email. Now, we talked about it in office hour. Your Discord will open up and you will be moved to your new class. You will not have access to our MERN Discord anymore. So if there's anything in there that you want, Gray is going to post if you are going to projects and algorithms, Gray is going to post the project kind of idea or the requirements. And if you're going to Java even, I would just say save that on your computer. That way you have access to it and you can kind of think about it into Java because you eventually will go to projects and algorithms. So Gray will post that. And then you tomorrow will get moved to your new class with your new students and your new instructor. So you will be receiving an email. As a reminder, next week is off. So there's no Coding Dojo at all. There's no TAs, no Dojo Hall, and no instruction. So next week is totally off from an instructor side, a TA side, the entire company. It is our sort of middle of the year. We've all been teaching and going. So we just take a week break to learn and do some other stuff as well. Okay. Any questions on what to move forward before we jump into kind of my here's what I would encourage and here's what I would say. And there's a million tips or tricks that we're going to jump into. And this can be a little bit long, but any questions on what to expect going next, the break week, anything like that? I will also say there is let me actually get it real fast. There's an end of stack survey. I know you guys love surveys, as do I. Alas, I do not. But it does help us. It helps Paul and Gray and I with that. And this is on this. It just helps us know what we could have done differently. Obviously, I know last week could have gone a lot differently, but what we could have done differently and what we can do and improve on, or what we did well to help us. I will put this in chat, but just know that it is in our class calendar as well. So that is helpful for us. If you have the time, if you're able and willing, that would be helpful for us just to understand what we can do. Cool. Okay. Now we're going to dive in. Somebody said the P&A recs stay the same from class to class, right? I have Java next, and I want to use this off week to get started. Yeah, so it stays the same regardless. You will pick a language to do your personal project, and then you'll pick a language for your team project. So you probably can't move forward with your team project. You don't know who your team is yet. Um, and then you do have to get it approved. So the only thing I would say, if you're going to get started, that's fine. Make sure it hits the criteria. But I would hate, if you kind of go off kilter and you spend 9 weeks working on this thing, and then your project and algorithms instructor's like, nah, that's not really going to work. So that's the only thing I'd be cautious with there. But as long as you follow that structure and hit those things, then you should be fine. There's no like you can only do it in this sector or anything like that. We give pretty free range as long as you hit a couple of different things. Somebody asked any Java resources? Friends, I am not a Java developer. I do not have any Java. I did C sharp. I like C sharp. I do not like Java, if I'm being blatantly honest. Um, so somebody asked how many people are in the teams. I think it's 3 to 4. I think it's 3 to 4 is the max. So I do not have any. Gray and Paul, if you guys have any Java resources, feel free to drop those, but I do not have any. The good news. Go ahead, Paul.
I'm a MERN through and through.
Absolutely. The good news is
in Python.
Java, yeah, and Python. Oh, I'll die for Python. The good news is Java isn't antiquated, and I say antiquated as meaning like it's been around for so long that there's a million things on YouTube and a million learning things for Java. Like it's anything you need to learn in Java, it's probably on YouTube because it has been around for decades. So somebody asked, what will algorithms be like, format or groups? You're going to be learning about algorithms, and some of your homework is going to be algorithms. You're going to be learning in class, just like we do with like an instruction, just like we're teaching or we teach MERN. But then you also have, so it's not going to be groups per se. But I mean, if you'll have homework and you can still work in a group, I guess, in theory, in the same way that you could have worked in a group on assignments here. So it's just assignments. Cool. Great questions, friends. Anything else? Cool. Okay. So the whole point of today's class is we want to talk. Oh, somebody did have one more. Is the personal project due first or the team? I believe personal project is due first, it's first 2 weeks, and then you do the team second. So great question. Okay, so today's whole point of class is what I wish I would have known when I came out of the boot camp. So I was also a Coding Dojo bootcamp grad. And since then, I've worked for a couple companies, had various jobs, worked as a developer, obviously, been an instructor for a long time. And these are things I wish I would have known. We talked about this in office hour a little bit, is you guys are new, right? And so you take this boot camp, and Gray kind of asked this question in office hour of what do you want to do? Where do you want to go? And somebody, I think it was Philip, was like, I don't know where to go. I don't know what there is to do. Tell me all of the paths. And so this is the idea, just to, I'm not going to tell you every path because there's hundreds of paths you can go on. But I'm gonna try to expand your brain to kind of, as you're job searching and thinking through, okay, what would I be well at? Well, how am I suited? I am different than Paul, who is different than Gray, right? We all have different strengths. Gray loves data. I do not. is not my forte, right? I love business. I love products. I love product management. I love understanding economics, and I like using code to do that. So because we're different, we might look for different things. And so the whole point of today is to kind of help you guys get prepared. Um, if you're going to Java, this will still be wildly helpful, but there's some things, maybe some timelines. And if I don't say it, just please kind of take it and attribute it to yourself. I would say that even if you're moving to Java, if you start on the timeline now, like you're still going to be way ahead of most people. So these are things that I would start thinking through. It is not uncommon for us to have people who get a job before they even graduate, but those are always the people that have already been applying for a long time, right? That are having interviews that are doing certain things. So um, yeah, okay. So job search tips and tricks. So it's broken down as I'm gonna kind of teach you about like here's how I would search. Here's some avenues. Here's some things we can go to. Then we're going to go into now preparing for the job search, the functional tools that I would say, here's some things that you could do if you wanted. And then lastly, we're going to talk a little bit about negotiation. Now, again, I have to say, none of this stuff is supported by Perdocio or Coding Dojo. These are all my thoughts. These are all my experiences that I'm giving to you. This is not financial help. This is not financial advice. This is just me as a human saying, this is what I wish I would have known, as if I'm talking to myself and you guys are a bird or a fly on the wall and you just happen to hear me. I don't know that I have to legally say that, but I do just to cover my bases. Okay. Job search tips and tricks. First things first, LinkedIn is going to be your best friend. I promise you, promise you, promise you. And it sounds so dumb, and I get it, but I have seen more people be successful by having a successful LinkedIn than people just cold applying. So when you are going to apply, and you guys can start this whether you're going into projects and algorithms or you're going into Java. And let me say this actually before I even get started, the job search should start now. You should be searching for jobs. Now, that's not to give you extra pressure. And that's not to overwhelm you with, oh my gosh, I'm already behind. But if you wait until you're finally done with the boot camp, you're going to be behind. That's just, I not to put any extra pressure, but that's just the reality, right? And so if I were you, wherever you're going, Java or projects and algorithms, start some of this stuff. You don't have to do all of it, right? You don't have to put in 10 applications a day and blah, blah, blah. You don't have to do that. But some of this stuff, like being on LinkedIn, is going to be your best friend. There's a guy named Danny Thompson. If you go to YouTube, YouTube, and you type Danny Thompson, LinkedIn series. So he goes through this. So Danny Thompson is a developer. He is a developer advocate, and this is a role that I love. It's actually one of my dream roles. But he's a developer advocate, and I think now he's moved into developer. But he was a developer advocate for Microsoft, worked for some big companies. And I think he's a dev at Home Depot now. But what he does is he talks in these, just basically looks through people's LinkedIn and says, hey, here's some ways that you can optimize your LinkedIn. Some things to note is that LinkedIn is a wildly used tool by recruiters. When you guys are getting recruited, or when you guys are applying for jobs, or if you're setting yourself up to get recruited, if you're wondering what is a recruiter, big tech companies will hire people to go and fill jobs faster. So if they say, hey, I want 4 developers, they will hire a recruiting company. Often it's third party, or sometimes they have them in house, but often it's third party. Say, hey, go find me the best candidate. And so what these recruiters do, their entire job is to go and find good candidates. And then they put a candidate up. And then and they want to help you. So oftentimes you might think of recruiters as these people that are like down, but they actually want to help you because if you get placed and you stay there for like 3 months, they get paid. So it is advantageous for them to get you a job. So they're your middleware. They are the one connecting you to your boot camp. And so what they'll do is if they have all of these positions, they will go scour the internet on Indeed, on LinkedIn, and they will approach you and say, hey, are you interested in doing this? I see that you have these skills. I think this is a great opportunity for you, blah, 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 blah. For LinkedIn, because it's such a popular tool, what you need to do is the way it works is the more you are uh, communicating or utilizing the application, the web page, the higher on the list. If they go to a I live in Seattle, if they say like software developer Seattle, the more I'm engaging with LinkedIn, the higher on that list. Is that fair? No. It doesn't indicate that I've got better skills. That's just the reality, right? LinkedIn wants more people to engage because they have more people to engage. They may have a better product, so they make it advantageous. So doing things, Denny Thompson talks a lot about it. So if you go um, here, just Danny Thompson. Yeah, he was a, a gas station fry cook, and then now he was a developer advocate, and now he's a developer. Um, and so using LinkedIn for this is really, really, really a popular thing. Make sure you guys are utilizing LinkedIn because it will be a tool. Danny Thompson's got a lot of videos, and it just is like getting your LinkedIn up and running. There's really easy ways now to engage. Going on ChatGPT and asking for a tip or a trick for JavaScript and saying, "Hey, did you know that you could do this?" I mean, that's like engagement right there, right? You're not even writing it, takes you 5 seconds and then you're engaging, right? Going and commenting on people's posts, that also is engagement as well. Okay, but LinkedIn is going to be a great friend. And yeah, it looks like I think it's Jennifer. Um, yeah, Jennifer got recruited through LinkedIn. That's a very common thing. So make sure, sorry to reading this. Yeah, make sure that you are getting your LinkedIn ready. You've got a photo. Doesn't need to be professional. I don't know. Like obviously it's not like a Facebook profile. So think about what do you want to portray? If you're wearing something unique or wearing something that could be maybe politically abrasive or, just abrasive in general, maybe don't do that. Like try to be as quote unquote like basic as possible, if you will, and professional as possible. So um, yeah, Jennifer said if you sign up for the LinkedIn Premier, so the premium, it is $30 a month though, which is pretty high, but it will help you put the list because you're also paying to be higher. So totally up to you if you have the funds, you can do that. Um, so please make sure. Oh, I guess it's more than that now. That's crazy. You do get access to LinkedIn Learning if you want to do that, but you have so many learning opportunities. I'm not sure that it's worth the $30. Um, there are one thing just to note, and Christian said this, and it's a great example. There are some scams that you should be aware of. So if a recruiter, if something sounds too good to be true, oftentimes it is, right? If they're saying, "Hey, will you just send me your social security number? I want to get some information over, and we already have an offer ready for you," something like that. It's too good to be true. Don't do that. If they're trying to send you a place, I think Gray had an experience where they're like, "Hey, we want to send you a check for something. Just give us your routing number," and then they just do it for money laundering. So I mean, genuinely, the rule is if it is too good to be true, not that you're not incredible, but it probably is, right? If you're not setting up phone calls and going through interviews, make sure that you are sort of setting that up. And if it feels weird, it's okay to be like, "Hey, this feels weird. Let me investigate. Let me make sure." The second thing to look up on LinkedIn if there's a scam is to always make sure in the email that it is a legitimate email. So instead of it saying from Amazon, they might say from Amazon. So it's like an M instead of an N. And so you might think, "Oh, I'm chatting with an Amazon recruiter," but it's different, right? So make sure that the emails, that's a normal thing for like, it's a phishing attack too. So, I mean, that's just, you should always be aware of who you're connecting with and talking to and never give too much information. But you will get a lot of recruiters or people. Oftentimes, what I get is like, "Hey, I am a great developer. I have a lot of people, but they're in the US. I'll give you a cut if you just like act like me or be my US facing person. And then I can give you money and I'll do all the work." It's like, okay, well, that's not going to make any sense. Like that's just a scam right there. So just be aware of that for LinkedIn as well. The second thing I want to bring up, and this is something I'm going to sit on this a little bit, is broaden your horizon for your job search. Now, if you are saying, "I want to be a software developer," great. And if you've got the funds to be that, then sure, keep grinding and keep going. I did see a really great post, and it was actually very encouraging today on Reddit. There's a lot of Reddit things too, so like Reddit's a great tool just to learn some stuff, to like CS jobs and something like that. But it can often become, I got laid off. Oh my gosh, I'm so sad. The world is ending for developers. And somebody posted, and they're like, "Hey, I just want to say, here's the reality of everything. Over 300,000 jobs in tech have been laid off in the last year, right? And that's kind of overwhelming, right? And you think as a developer, oh my gosh, and all these people hear that Meta laid off people and Google laid off people. And so if you're like, I just learned how to code, they're probably going to say, like, oh, it's not a great season now. But this post did some of the data and jumped in, and it was like, of that 300,000, only 7,500 have been developers, like globally for these main companies, which 7,500 is a lot, but it's like Facebook and Twitter laid off a majority of that. So just to say that the market's not as bad as people are saying, there's still plenty of people hiring software developers. Um, so if you want to, yeah, just like Paul said, tons of middle management maybe got cut, but lots of developers are still coming. And this is just a cycle, right? They cut a little bit and then they grow and they're like, oh no, I need to fill spaces. And then they cut and they grow. And it just is how it goes. So if you want to be a developer, that's okay. You might take you a little bit, but you can broaden your horizon. And this is what I wish I would have known. So when I graduated, I went into freelance stuff, and we'll talk about freelancing here in a second. But basically, I was just building a website for anybody. And anybody that wanted one, or if they wanted me to update their Squarespace, or they wanted me to do X, Y, or Z, I would do it. And simultaneously, I came back and got my black belts in all of my languages. And then I became a TA. So I was like, okay, I'm going to be a TA, and it's a great job. Being a TA is great because you get access to lots of material and you get to kind of keep it fresh. Um, but I came back and I was a TA. Then I went into instruction because I actually love this, right? I love instructing and I love tech, and we've talked about that a lot. And then after a while, I moved to another team within Coding Dojo that I wasn't that fond of. And I decided, hey, you know what? I think it's time for me to branch out. And also, while I was kind of thinking that, I got reached out by a friend and said, hey, my team is hiring. Are you interested? And we're going to talk about like salaries and stuff here in a bit. But, and I told you, I'll just tell you what I made. I didn't realize that there was so many other things that if you just know how to code even a little bit, like even like a quarter of what you guys currently know, there's a million jobs out there. There's a million things if you just know how to write a little bit of SQL, or if you know how to write a little bit of Python, a little bit of JavaScript, a little bit of Java. If you know how to do that, really it's JavaScript, SQL, and Python transparently. But if you know how to do that, then you can get a job pretty quickly that pays a lot. So my encouragement is to broaden your horizons for search. There are a million different jobs out there that can pay a lot of money. One is like a quality assurance developer. So I just went on Indeed and I put quality assurance developer remote, right? And here they're anywhere from $65,000 to $105,000. And so you basically go through and make sure when code is written, does this work right? Does this work okay? You're not really writing the code. You're just basically finding bugs. You're getting features and you're saying, okay, now let me test it. Let me go try to break it. Let me create edge cases. But that's a whole industry that pays anywhere from 80 to 110. This one's 120 to 138. No, that was an automation engineer, so probably a little bit different. But software quality assurance engineer, 103 to 128. And so there's plenty of roles there. This is a role that I wish I would have known, and it still intrigues me to this day. And one of my best friends does this, is a role called a sales engineer. Now, I love people, I love talking, and I used to be in sales, and so it just has come naturally to me. I love business, and there are roles called a sales support engineer that basically what they do is there will be a salesman for some sort of software. So you think about Snowflake, right? Which is Snowflake's, or let's say AWS. Well, what they will do is somebody is going to go, there's a salesman trying to go sell a company on AWS. So they go and they collect all this information from the company. What is the issue? What is the pain point that they're trying to get or trying to solve? what have they tried, what is their pricing, all of that stuff, right? That way they can like the salesperson gets all that information. What they then do is partner with a sales support engineer or a sales engineer and says, hey, my partner or my company is having these issues. Can you, with our tool, figure out a solution? Right. And so my one of my best friends does this and he writes a little bit of SQL. He works for a big database company. He writes some SQL and says, yep, I can get this data. I can solve this issue. Just writes a little bit of SQL and you can make like hundreds of thousands of dollars. The beautiful thing about it is that you don't actually have to generate leads. It's not as much of like you've got to, if you don't do X amount of sales, you're fired. You're just kind of coming as support for them. But because you have the knowledge and the ability to do a little bit of coding, whether it's through Python, whether it's through, the tool that you're having, SQL, you can make so much money. When I was at Twilio, the person who brought me over there was going for a job and it's base. I mean, they live in San Francisco, so it's a little bit different. It's a little bit higher. We'll talk about tiers when we talk about salaries. Um, but their base was 180 and they could go up to like 240, right? My buddy, I have no idea how much he makes, but I'm fairly positive it's around 250. Like he makes so much money. Um, and so we were talking yesterday and we were looking at his exact job and how much it was. And it was 250. And it's like, okay, great. So you can make a whole bunch of money and you're not necessarily coding, right? You're not necessarily just writing code all day. You're just problem solving with code. There's other like implementation. So that's what I did. Is at Twilio there was an implementation engineer. We call it a customer success engineer. And so it was post sale and post sales. I jumped in and there'd be like a company like Nike would come and say like, hey, we're trying to migrate all this data using your tool. We're trying to do X, Y, or Z. And I would come in and say, okay, with this tool, I see your function or I see your code base. Here's what you really need to do. It's kind of like problem solving. The way our tool works, you're missing a parameter or you're trying to call and you're not really handling it well. Let me go. It's kind of like a code review, if I'm being blatantly honest with you. It's like they would give me their code and I couldn't legally write their code for them. So it's not like I had to jump into their code and write it. I would just say, great, yep, here's the documentation. Here's an example of how this function would look if you were going to do it, based off your information. Here's an example that you can then go take to your developers and they can then try to implement this tool in the correct way. And that's what I did, right? It was a post sales engineer. So I knew the tool uh, and then I implemented with code, right? And it was not a developer job in the extent of I wasn't just sitting and writing code all day, but it paid over six figures. Um, Sweet office with like a bunch of fun stuff. So I just say that there's tons of different opportunities out there. Um, There are UI UX roles, which is user experience, user interface. Now that's a little bit more designy. There are now boot camps coming about that, but if you like design, you can get into UI UX if you know how to code. UI UX is fairly easy to pick up, and you get paid well over six figures. I have a buddy who's a UI UX developer, makes like 115, and then he just went and lived in Colombia because it's remote. So he's like, I'm gonna go live in Colombia for 3 months. So he's currently there. Um, just to show that it's not just developing, right? And if you know a little bit of code, you can do lots of stuff. Sales support engineer is a very fascinating job. There is, like Gray said, technical writing jobs. Now, I would probably say, and this is not to deter, I mean, I'm not trying to deter you. So if you love writing and this is your passion, go for it. I would probably say in the next 5 years, technical writing jobs are going to be minute. They're going to be empty, especially once ChatGPT can look at your entire code base and the parameters expand. It's going to be able to write that for you. Um, but there are lots of roles that if you're wanting to do it like person facing, so like you think of documentation with, um, I think of documentation with like Bootstrap, right? Somebody wrote all that and how that works. That's a role, right, that you can do and that you can build and you can create. Um, so there's lots of different avenues. You don't just have to be a developer. If you want to be a developer, go for it. Game development's great. Now it's a little bit more challenging. It's very different. It's a little bit more like physics because you're dealing with like 3D objects and how they operate and move. If you are interested in game development, I would learn C sharp. That's a really common language, or Java. Those are two that are really popular for going into game development. A lot of stuff is built in either Java or C sharp, and they're both structured basically the same. C sharp is like if Java and Python had a child. Um, so it's a really cool language. So I would go into that. Just again to say is broaden your horizons. You don't just have to look up software engineer jobs. You can look up sales or solutions engineer. Sometimes it's called solutions architect. If you're interested in DevOps in the cloud, you can go into that. But one thing I do want to state is these are all entire industries, right? Like UI UX is its own industry. So if you want to go into it, that's fine. Just know that you're entering into, people go to boot camps for UI UX. So it's a little bit of a heavier lift compared to something like a sales engineer, solutions engineer. The hard thing is that a lot of them will call the same job a different title. The one's like a solutions architect, and the other one's a solutions engineer. The other one's a sales support engineer. They all do the same thing. So you got to kind of be creative with how you're saying it, reading the job listings. But just know that you aren't locked into just being a dev with this new skills that you have. There's a ton of different jobs that you can learn and you can go into as well. And then freelancing is an opportunity. A couple things that say on freelancing, it's quite a quite a challenge at the beginning, so it can be a little bit tougher to get going. Avenues that I think are great and easy to jump into are like if you have local real estate agents or restaurants or coffee shops or like I had a life coach reach out to me and I built her website. So things like that. Facebook weirdly is like a good marketplace if you have Facebook or if you have like the groups within your area. So like where I live, there's like a Mercer Island Facebook, right? And so it like or group, and so I'm in it. And I've gotten actually a couple jobs. They're like, does anybody know somebody who knows how to code? I'm like, I am that somebody, and then I get the job. Um, Now, a couple tips and tricks on freelancing. If you get a job, somebody asked, is it better to do hourly or by project? I would say that as a beginner, hourly is probably not going to be where you go because you are going to take a lot longer than it should take. Just transparently, right? You're learning, you're growing. And so also, secondly, if there's a challenging project and you're really efficient at it, why should you get paid less? Right? And so there's different ways that you can do it. I usually say I would do it by the project, get the scope of the project, and say, great, here are the things. And then depending on how you want to do it. Now, if you were to come out and start saying that you're going to make $80 an hour, that's probably going to be too high, right? If you're going to say this is going to take me 20 hours and I'm going to make $80 an hour, here's what, $1,600, maybe they'll do that. But I would say that you probably are going to be in that like 35 to 40 range. Is like a pretty safe place to start. You say it's going to take 10 hours, great. Kind of starting a project, depending on, obviously, there's so many factors, and depending on exactly what you're doing, if you're building it from scratch versus if you're using something like a Squarespace or a Wix, which is just kind of drag and drop. That might be a price difference, right? And kind of what you're having to do. So here's my advice. Make sure you have it written down of what is expected from you and you make a contract. There's lots of free stuff that you can make contracts on. So make sure you make a contract, right? For X price. Here's how much it's going to cost. Here's the expectation. And then in the contract, say if additional features are wanted, then we do this on an hourly basis, right? Where it's a minimum of 1 hour of a feature, but I can give you and then you'll give an estimate and say, hey, this probably take me 10 hours, so it's going to be around $300. And if they say, okay, then it's like, cool, this took me 10 hours. Great. Like, even if it took you 5, it took you 10. So that's one, is I would probably start by project. Second thing is, if you are going to give a timeline, this is the best advice that's ever been given to me, and I never followed it, but it is the best advice, is take your timeline of how long it's gonna take you to do it and triple it. Because especially when you're getting started, now if you're saying this probably gonna take me 2 weeks and I'm gonna give you 6 weeks, if it's something that's up and running, then maybe be like, I can try 5 weeks. if they're coming back to you, but I would give them 6 weeks because you're going to run into issues that you didn't foresee. I did that every single time I did freelancing. I ran into issues I didn't see, and it took longer, right? But I'm telling them it's going to take 1 week, and then it now doesn't look good on me, right? And so finally, towards the end, I learned, no, let me expand this. And then the worst case scenario is it takes you that entire time, and then you deliver the project on time. Best case scenario is you deliver the project early, right? And you say, hey, great, this project was early. I'm done. I'm in testing or I'm in whatever, and I can add an additional feature for free, right? Like however you wanted to do that to kind of build your clientele. So always make sure you do that. That will be super helpful. Again, freelancing is doable. It's a grind. There's lots of stuff um, like Fiverr and Upwork that you're going to be competing against. Now, sometimes people like to work with somebody local. So I think if you're finding somebody local, that's going to be your advantage. Um, if I'm just being transparent, the people that are on Fiverr, especially from countries that are not as developed as the US, are just always going to outbid you from a price perspective. Like just because 15 US dollars goes a lot farther in some other countries than it does here, right? And so if you're trying to compete with that, it might be a grind versus if you're kind of grassroots campaigning or getting freelance stuff, finding a coffee shop that you love, build a rapport with them and say, hey, I noticed your website's really poorly done. I can, what would you think if I did it for, what would you think about a revamp? Here's kind of what I'm thinking. Here's why I think this would be a good, return on your investment. You're going to be a little salesy and then they might say, yeah, we'll pay you $350. Like my buddy does that for um, web for that's literally how he gets so many uh, photography deals. Like, hey, I love your product. It looks great. I don't see that you have very many social media stuff. I'd love, like, even just in exchange for product, this is what he does. In exchange for product, I'll give you some photos. Um, so, I mean, I wouldn't say like exchange for free coffee, give me this, but that might be something. Sometimes at the beginning, you might have to do that. And now some of those people have become his customers. And they've introduced him to bigger customers. And the other day, he did a headshot for the CEO of GitHub, like just because he knew somebody who knew somebody and just kind of worked his way. So that if you're going to freelance, I would absolutely say look geographically where you're at first. It's going to be a lot easier to get clients if you're face to face than if you try to join like a Fiverr or an Upwork, because again, you're always going to be outranked. Any questions on job search tips, tricks, kind of expanding the realm, anything like that? Any questions? Yes, you can make business cards. Absolutely. They're usually pretty cheap. You can always get them like a deal on like Vistaprint or something.
Just wanna, if no one has questions, maybe they're about to, but so this is recorded as well. So, they don't, they just didn't say nothing. Gonna repeat if for those who weren't in office hour as well. So definitely piggybacking what Will has said. But what I asked in office hour was, what are you doing to justify your decision? A, taking this course at Coding Dojo. You guys paid a lot of money. Some of y'all took out loans. Some of y'all still paying it back. Some of you guys use your savings, et cetera, et cetera. Make sure you're thinking about these things before you graduate from the program. And don't be like one of the folks, like myself, where, don't know what to do afterwards with the career. So Will is giving you golden advice right now. I did not get this advice, not because, he didn't want to give it to me, but but different time during that time. So this is definitely not every instructor does this. So I hope that everyone is really seriously thinking about these things. It's not a coding dojo thing where people are going to go into coding and, don't end up coding. Like there's doctors, lawyers, nurses, those who go into finance, whether that be accounting, whatever, and they go to school for 2 years, 4 years, 6 years, 10 years, spent literally hundreds of thousands of dollars, and they're like, oh, I don't want to do this anymore. Don't be like those folks. Make sure that you spend your money wisely and like, hey, what am I doing? You have so many resources here. TAs are here, your instructors are here, ask us questions. Do not just stand here like a stick in a mud. So please reach out to us to kind of share, experiences, how we can help you and guide you. It's going to be a challenging road, but if it was easy, you would enjoy it. Trust in me. We may complain that it's not as hard or whatever the case may be, but if it was easy, it will not be worth it. So we like the challenge, are literally built in that particular way. So I'm hoping that this discussion here, or what Will is sharing, will spark some ideas on the type of careers that you could go. Again, if you literally have no idea, talk to TAs, talk to instructors. We can give you a lot of advice or suggestions that will help you think about what you could do for your life, because obviously you know your life better than we do. So please, 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 please reach out. I won't go into every single detail, but students that have reached out, like I prevented one student from getting scammed, because I got scammed when it came to the job thing. And I was happy that I was able to help him. So my challenge was able to help another student. Also, sharing with students, either writing recommendations or, hey, tell me about this job or this, this opportunity. We were able to kind of get things rolling and so on and so forth. So just letting you know, it's going to be a challenge. We're here, but there's careers out there, there are positions out there. And if you're hungry, it's out there. Just letting y'all know. So definitely talk a little bit more, but just really want to reiterate that here. Like all the things that Will is mentioning, that they're not meant to be easy. They're not. So if you think this is supposed to be something easy, I'm sorry, but not sorry. That's not what life is really about. So whether you chose a different career other than coding, it's going to be a challenge. Whether you chose to go into finance, or whether you chose to go into manual labor, laborious jobs, whatever, state, whatever, government, everything's going to be a challenge. So just please, please, please reach out. You have free resources with tuition that you guys paid here. Please reach out for any help or assistance so we can help you at least get to the next level. You don't want to stare back at your life a year from now and be mad. You don't. It ain't gonna be nice. So with that said and done, I'll yield and go back on mute.
Thanks, Gray. One thing I do want to point out too is if you've got a dream to work at a company, so let's say you really want to look like for me, one of my dreams, there's two dreams, is one to work at Microsoft because they have a treehouse conference room, and I just think that's one of my dreams, to have a meeting in the treehouse. Secondly is I want to work for Apple. I think that Apple is dope and they're just an incredible company. It is sometimes very challenging to become a developer and just go straight into Apple. It's a lot easier is to work a job like a solutions engineer, like a success engineer, an implementation engineer, and then internally transfer to your dream job. So just because your dream job is at a certain job, a certain company, and maybe they're not hiring at the moment, it is they want to hire within. They want to promote within. Every job, like when I was at Twilio, immediately on my first day, they're like, here's our job track. In a year, you had to work here for a year, work at your position for a year. And if you're in good standing, we want to try to help you get to where you want to be in life and in your career. And so that's just something to think about too. So if you're always just like, I'm gonna shoot for the stars, and I'm gonna try to get my dream job right now. Awesome. I'm in your corner. I'm advocating for you. But also know that if you can get into that job in another way and you can financially afford it and financially do that, if you can get into that job another way or that company another way, it's much easier to internally transfer. And especially a lot of these big tech companies have tracks to internally transfer and help you. So that's just another way to kind of get around it and say, like, not be so, okay, what's the next year look like? But like, hey, what's the next 10 years look like? In 5 years, I want to be in this job. In 3 years, so how do I get into this company now, and then I can work my way to this dream job? Kind of like starting as a janitor and working to principal, right? Same sort of idea. It might not just get principal immediately. You might have to work your way up, same sort of thing. And that's a really easy way to get into companies. Last thing is referrals are king. Make sure you're networking. Make sure you are talking to people. People get paid if they refer you and you get the job. My friend got paid $3 grand when I worked at Twilio. Like when I got hired, she got paid $3 grand. Right. So people want to help you get in there. So make sure don't just randomly ask, can you give me a referral? That's gonna come off as weird. Because also if you're a terrible employee or they don't really know you, they're not gonna be as likely. But if you get to know people and network, then getting referrals is a way that's serendipitous and you're almost guaranteed an interview unless you're trying to like become the CEO, then that's a little bit more of a challenge. Um, cool. Yeah, Jennifer put in here that technical program manager or products manager is another tool. Yep, like all of those, having code stuff can help you in tons of ways. I mean, again, there's hundreds of different options. Program product manager, those are really popular. Basically, getting a job, overseeing a project, and maybe overseeing the coding portion, but you have devs that are actually writing it. But you're working with marketing, you're working with devs, you're working with, um, you know, sales, you're working with whatever to kind of data science to make sure that this product goes to market in an efficient way. So if that's kind of up your alley, then absolutely go for it. Okay, just some functional tools that I would say like next week, what would I go for? What would I do? Or as you guys are approaching, HackerRank is going to be a great one. I've showed you this before. It's just a tool that helps you do algorithms. We talked about this yesterday. I can't remember if it was recorded or not, but my encouragement is go start doing HackerRank. There's another one I've heard about today, and it is awesome. Actually, do this one. Don't do HackerRank. No, just kidding. Do HackerRank too, but it's called Neat Code. Gray, I don't know, and Paul, I don't know if you guys heard of this. I heard it over here. It's not Leak Code. It's Neat Code. But this is a way that basically it takes from Leak Code. It's called the Big 75. And so it was 75 of the top questions from all of FANG. If you heard of FANG, it's just a way that we kind of talk about the big companies. It's Facebook, it's Apple. For some reason, it's Netflix and then Google. And so that's what, if it's FANG, FANG, that's, if you see FANG, that's what it's referring to. It's like, if it's a FANG interview question, it's just an interview question at the big companies. But Neat Code's a great tool because you can practice and you can learn all about this stuff. What I would encourage you to do is to really start learning how to do this. Part of the interview is going to be a whiteboard most of the time. Now there is, I think if you Google companies that don't require whiteboard, I think that is there's like lists that don't actually do this. But it's just a way they want to see how you think, how you operate. You're going to learn a lot more about this in projects and algorithms. That's the whole point of it. But my encouragement is do this, write the code. You're going to learn about time and space complexity. But then once this happens, Neat Code's really cool because it gives you a video solution of how to do it. And then everything's in Python. But you can also use ChatGPT to say, what is the time and space complexity after you try to figure it out yourself, because you need to know how to do it, confirm and say, yep, this is the time and space complexity. And then you can say, can I make this more efficient? Right. And then if you do that and tell me what you did to make it more efficient, that way you can constantly be learning, this is what I can do, and this is how I make it more efficient. So doing tools like that, I would say, especially right out of the boot camp. Next week is kind of a gimme week. You guys have been grinding. If you wanted to take a little bit of time, you can. I would take a couple days. I wouldn't take maybe the whole week. But maybe do something less code intensive, do some LinkedIn stuff, whatever. But make sure you keep a schedule. This is post boot camp. Keep a schedule. Work on algorithms. Say, cool. I had class from 4 to 6 every single Tuesday through Thursday. I'm gonna do algorithms then. If you get off schedule, and this is the blatant honest truth, I had people that went through the boot camp with me that paid the 15, 16, whatever it costs now, like lots of thousands of dollars, who are now not doing anything in development. They don't code at all. They went back to another job. And that's not a dig on them. Life happens. Sometimes people don't get breaks. That is a thing. But oftentimes it's just people that just, I had a cohort mate that already sort of exhibited some of that, like after, like there's no way they're going to get a job because they don't really want to work now. But keeping a schedule keep you in that sort of thought process and going. And coding is a normal thing, friends, that if you don't do it for a week or two, you will forget a lot of it. A lot of you guys are already saying, I already forgot Python, right? Um, it is, if you don't use it, you will lose it. That is a very common thing with coding. So make sure you keep a schedule, make sure you're still coding. It comes back and it comes back quickly. You're like, oh yeah. But it's not, it comes back easier than when you first learned it, but it's still challenging, right? And so you can get rusty, and the longer you take, the longer it takes to come back, right? So make sure you guys are keeping a schedule. My encouragement is to learn some cloud computing. This is obviously all based on the bandwidth you have. If you have the capacity to do that, then great. Don't. If you're just fighting for your life and trying to survive, obviously, then feel free to kind of take this with a grain of salt. But this is a great tool. You don't need to learn like in-depth cloud computing. That's an entire job. DevOps and solutions architects, it's literally an entire job that people do. But if you just have an understanding of the cloud, understanding of what hosting is, understanding what an EC2 instance is, or a virtual machine on Azure, these are the two biggest ones, Azure and AWS. AWS is king. What we did is we put it on something called an EC2 instance, Elastic Cloud Computing instance, basically just a big computer in a data center. But these two certificates, they are certificates. They cost $100, but oftentimes you can do a bunch of stuff, or they're doing a deal to like get $50 off. But it's worth it to have $100, because what this will do is it'll teach you just the basics and the fundamentals of the cloud, how the cloud works, what the different instances and different things are. Very general overview, but they're great. AZ 900 in the cloud practitioner as well. So if you have the capacity, at least have an understanding of a little bit of cloud computing, right? That can help you. Again, you don't have to go in depth and know all the different data pipelines and automations and knowing what lambdas do and all that. You just got, sorry, I just got distracted by Zach's thing. But yeah, make sure you just have at least an understanding of what a data center is, about what even is the cloud and how that works and how that operates. That'll be helpful. Somebody asked a question, because I told you guys to do some questions of, will Chat GPT take over and how to use it? I would say continue to use it, again, in the ways that I showed you, especially with algorithms. That's going to make you more efficient. If you use it and you don't know how to do algorithms and you say, just solve this for me, I promise you, you will not get a job, because you won't know what you're doing, right? Chat GPT is a very powerful tool, but if you use it just to kind of cheat your way, and only you know if you're doing that, it'll be so challenging for you to get a job, because you're not really going to know what you're doing. You can only fake it so much, until they give you a actual question, and then you're like, I don't know what to do. So it is a tool. GitHub Copilot is a tool. It is what every developer is using. AWS has one called Code Whisperer. I think it's free. But Copilot's kind of first to market, and they're dominating market share. Use them. They will help you code. Make sure you're understanding what you're doing. Now, there is a lot of ideas that ChatGPT is going to take away junior development roles. And to that, I would say partially. What I don't think, and this is all my opinion, right? I don't have like a PhD and whatever. What I think in my experience and in the teams that I've had, right, in the limited time this has been, is it allows me to write code a lot faster. So what might have taken me an hour or two, or problem solve that maybe I could push to somebody else, I can do it in a more efficient way. That's true. So realistically, just kind of, keeping it real with you guys, I could see how ChatGPT might be able to, a team of 5 people might be able to go down to 3, right? But what the absolute understanding throughout the industry, and everybody that I know is a developer, and everybody I've talked to, is that it's great for low level stuff. But if you're trying to connect a whole bunch of stuff together, or having some knowledge, it just isn't there. And so there still is going to be plenty of options for junior developers or entry level developers. And then once you get into that, again, I think maybe in 5 to 10 years, once they get access to an entire code base, we might have a little bit of issues, right? A little bit of a challenge, to where I don't know that a junior developer role, exactly like what Paul is saying, I don't know that junior developer role exists in the next 10 years, 5 years. Right now, I think you guys are a-okay. Might be a little bit limited, but the reality is too, is that those junior dev roles might exist, and this is just blatantly like truth, at companies that are really optimal. and like have great teams, but for like a lot of startups, they don't have no idea what they're doing. Like most companies have no idea what they're doing, right? And so for them to think like, oh, well, we can now cut down our team, they have no idea. The CEO is kind of like, I don't know anything about code, so just hire people who do. So I don't think it's going to take over. I don't think it's going to necessarily cut jobs per se, because right now the technology is just really not there. It's good for like a one little script or one little segment, but an actual entire code base, like it can't create our entire MERN application, right? It doesn't know how to do that. It doesn't know how to connect. It knows how to do the middlware, but I have to tell it to do the middleware, and it can do it really quickly, right? Um, so please continue to do that, and then do continued learning. Gray is right on. Right now, all these companies are kind of competing for free certificates. So there's Google certificates that maybe are $30, but I think Azure and AWS are coming out with, like Microsoft and AWS are coming out with free certificates in machine learning. I know that there's a thing I think by Zach that was talking about AI, the stuff on AI. There's like lots of free certificates that are coming out because they're all trying to get you to use their tools, is really what it is. It's like, cool, let me train you on AI. You'll have the certificate, but you're going to be trained on my tools. Therefore, you'll want to use Azure. But hey, that's advantageous for us. So keep learning. This is a job that you will continue to learn no matter what. Moving forward, learning is going to be, that's an expectation for everything that you're doing. Is you will always learn, as technology is ever changing, and it's continuing to grow. That's all I've got for functional tools. Any questions, any thoughts, anything, anything like that? Yeah, and I think Cameron's right too, is that chat may replace junior devs, but then when you do that, what ends up happening is like the progression is you go from junior dev to, software dev to senior dev. We cut out all the juniors, and you kind of have this gap. You no longer have this progression that a company needs to continue to grow, right? And to bring people in. So I think there's still always going to be the need for that. It just might be more efficient. But again, and this is my whole thing with ChatGPT and replacing stuff, is it will replace if we're running off the assumption that the company is okay with the current output and they wouldn't want more of an output. So if they've got 3 people, or if they've got 5 people and they're like, great, we're like launching all these features, we only need 3 people, let's cut down. But the reality is they're going to say, cool, if we've got more capacity, let's launch more features. Our throughput's going to be even higher. That's my sort of prediction with this, is that it's not going to really kill jobs. It's just going to make your production and your output even higher and doing more, because now maybe the work of 5 developers is what 8 would have been, right? So like instead of them diminishing, I think they're just going to maybe not. Yeah, I think they're just going to want more and more, and then they're like, oh, if I have one more developer, I can push out more features, and then we just keep growing, and then we're in that issue. So
I got just to kind of
And
comment on there. They're gonna be, this is only for certain industries. So if you're working in a like, the main whatever, top what 5 or 6 companies, whatever, the Meta, the Apple, Amazon, whatever of the world. Those are like for those companies, but there are literally hundreds, if not thousands, of companies out there, literally, and their code base or whatever is not updated. Government has been behind for a very long time, and
hours.
they will say, oh, the laws haven't caught up to tech and so on and so forth. Like these are things that, like, yes, down the line. So I don't want people getting discouraged, because there's still I'm just saying, there's still hospitals that don't have like the latest MRIs or the latest, treatments and, so on and so forth. They do manage, and that's why, like, that's why you pay certain prices in certain cities and certain states and so on and so forth. So it all depends on A, where you live, so B, the industry that you're working in. Just again, these are things to take in, consideration. A lot of Will is referring to, again, is like the big tech companies. Like, even if you take certain government states, those, you know, the certain government, whether federal or state, whatever, town, whatever the case may be, they're not going to be as techy as them. That's a lot of money that they don't spend, and they don't spend it on their employees, trust me. So, because tax dollars and all that other stuff, you know. So just letting y'all know that y'all still have a job 15, 20 plus years from now. This is just for those who
Absolutely.
are really into this high tech, you know, stuff. So just, you know, letting y'all know that it depends on the industry that you're going into. And every industry, I can't think of one, probably will echo the same sentiment. There's not one industry that does not use tech. Not one.
Yeah,
Everyone
every
has,
company. Yeah, the sentiment is that every company needs to be a tech company now. Because you have to have a
yeah,
website, you have to have some sort of app, or you have to have something.
correct. So just
Just to
wrap your
add
mind
one
around it.
thing,
Yeah, go
just to
ahead.
add one thing to what you're saying, Gray, like I've been in the tech industry now for 15 years, working for different areas within banking and with vendors such as Microsoft, IBM. I can tell you right now that Chat GPT is not something that any bank is looking to use because they're scared of it. They still have to be convinced, y'all. And they're years away from being convinced. They've been developing their own internal AI for the last 10 years. This is not new stuff that's come out. Like, it's new to the general public, but your bank has been using AI for 10 years in some industries. I helped set up AI within a large bank 5 years ago. So, and not to mention, like, it takes years to deploy it with any type of confidence. So, yes, this is a fancy new tool, and yay, we can use it, but there is absolutely zero market confidence yet that any company is just going to be like, yep, let my developers just go ahead and plug this on in to Chat GPT, and I'm going to get a working whatever I want. That's not realistic. It's not going to happen anytime soon. Not to mention it, like AI, like there is a phrase, it needs time to get smart. And how it gets smart is through iteration and through variety. That happens over time. Not to mention, you have to remember, like, this is repetitive function. It's not analytical in nature. It's giving you repeated answers to things it's been programmed to learn over time. So it's not necessarily something that you're going to get out of the box, be able to deploy in your firm and be like, yay, I can now ask this anything and it's going to do it for me. We're not there. And it's going to take a long time to get there for even a small section of a company. So, like, don't let this scare you. So much
Yeah,
of the market is not even willing to entertain it.
yeah, and I
Beautiful.
think just to like put in a end point on that is, you know, I one of my best friends works for an SEO company, and they're trying to implement sales wants ChatGPT implemented, and they work with some companies who work with the government, and they're like, absolutely not, because there's a lot of proprietary information. There's a lot of companies. Samsung got in trouble because ChatGPT is open source. Now, can they find out whose data is what? It'd be a real challenge. But a couple Samsung employees put proprietary information in ChatGPT and then got fired because that was a leak of information, right? So lots of companies, just like Jennifer and Gray are saying, the government right now is like, nope, I cannot have, like, Lockheed Martin is not going to use ChatGPT, right? Because it's open source. So if there is any sort of fears, it is a cool tool. Got a lot more hype than what it can really do. It's great. It's a cool little tool. It's really, really powerful tool. But yeah, from like companies just saying, yep, here's our entire code base, go fix it, that we are far, if that ever happens, they'll have to localize it and it'll have to be its own separated thing. And I think we're years away from that. So yeah, great stuff, Jennifer and Gray. Thanks for talking about that. And thanks for sharing your experience, Jennifer. That's really cool. Cool. All right. We're already 5 minutes over. So I'm not gonna make this quick. I'm gonna let you guys ask questions and do whatever you need. But now this is the kind of time of negotiation, things I wish I would have known. So there's a tool. Negotiations are weird. And when I first came out, just a little bit about my background is I went from in college, I flipped and sold oil, not like peanut oil, but like actual gasoline. I worked full time and I was working for an oil company while I was in college. And then after that, I quit and went and worked in the nonprofit realm. Turns out nonprofit realm does not pay very much money. And so then I turned around and learned how to code, right? And from there, I didn't really know anything about because I was working for these companies that were nonprofit or even for oil. So like sometimes you can get stock, but it was a small company and it was a private company. So there was no stock. There was no sort of anything like that. So here's some negotiation things. Again, these are just my experiences. Does not reflect anybody's thoughts or reasons or kind of whatever. But I'm going to tell you my exact case with Twilio, how much I got paid, what equity versus options looks like, ways that you can negotiate, tactics to kind of talk to a recruiter about, or how to get for a recruiter. Sorry, how to handle a recruiter. Though they are your friend, there are tactics to get more money, and just kind of different things. So just want to introduce one really cool tool and powerful tool called Levels, FYI. And I'll put this in the chat. Now, this is a really powerful tool because it is crowdsourced, meaning that it is whatever somebody puts in. So it's kind of just dependent that people are going to put this in, and it's based off of their data. So it's sort of anonymous. But what you can do is you can go here and you can look at salaries. And so this is to get you an understanding. If whenever you're applying for a job, as you guys are doing this, you should have this idea of what you want to get paid. Now, obviously, we'd all like to get paid $100 million an hour, right? Like, that's fine. But there's a few things. One, especially if I came from the nonprofit world, I made no money. So I was like, oh my gosh, I'd be happy with $70,000, right? And then I made that, and then I was like, okay, great. This is like so much money. I didn't know, and that is a lot of money. And so I'm not distinguishing that. But then I started looking at the market and looking at Seattle, and it's like, oh my gosh, for me working remote and living in Seattle, I am wildly underpaid. And so I started looking for a job. And my friend came to me and said, hey, um, I have an opportunity at Twilio, right? Are you interested? And I was like, okay, sure, but what does it pay? And so one thing I did is I just said customer success engineer salary segment. Segment was the company that within Twilio. And so within Twilio, this was the customer success job. And I was like, okay, the median is here. And I was like, okay, great. I'm getting an idea of what the median is, but I live in Seattle, so it might be a little bit more. So I need, somewhere over on this pay range over here. And there's other tools you can do. Levels FYI is really cool because you can go salaries by location. And so if I click this, it will eventually show up. I'm in Seattle, so you can type your area, but I'm in Seattle. So this tells you, okay, for a software engineer, the median total comp. Now I was like, what is total comp? I have no idea what this is. That's what we're going to talk about here. Median total comp is around $208,000 for a software engineer. And what you can do is you can go in and do some filters. Now these people, like this is a 15-year experience, 6 years at this company, software engineer 3 back end, and their total compensation annually is $520,000. Obviously, they have 15 years. And you're like, well, I'm comparing apples to oranges. This does not make sense. You go to the table filter and say entry level, right? And then you could say new offer only. Because I didn't work at the company, right? So then now I'm thinking, okay, 21 hours ago in Redmond, there's somebody who is an L1. And so each company kind of has their own kind of tiers. And this is an important thing to know, and we'll talk about it when I get to my actual negotiation. But they have their tiers, and based off that tier, you'll have a pay band. So this is an L1. You can kind of look at it and say their level is L1. They had 0 years of the company. They didn't put any demographics. Sometimes they'll put a demographic, their gender or how they identify, and then they put maybe if they have any schooling or not. But here's the thing that I want you to kind of know and see is that it's kind of like when you buy a car. I don't know the last time you bought a car. What they'll focus on is your monthly payment. They won't focus on the total price of the car. If I can get you your monthly payment, what kind of monthly payment are you looking for, right? You looking for $500 a month? Let me see what I could do. Looking for $1,000 a month, and they can do some stuff, right? To where maybe they take down the price of the car, but they add something else. They're like, great, I got you $1,000 a month. But you're like, well, what's the total price of my car? That's really what I want to know. Same sort of thing will happen with tech. Is they will just throw out a total comp, but uh, it's not so black and white. So total comp really consists of real three things. It is your base salary. And so here, this person's making $120,000 annually. That is your base salary. That is your money, right? You can think about it like I signed a contract and I make 120 grand now. Then they're getting 50,000 in RSUs. This is residual stock units. This is also called equity. And then lastly is they got a $10,000 bonus. So sometimes you'll get a sign-on bonus, a relocation bonus, whatever. Oftentimes you get like a sign-on bonus as well, especially if you're coming from another company and they need to entice you to come. Then they will give you a sign-on bonus. So what they'll throw at you is you'll make 180 total comp, but the reality is you make $120,000 and you've got a $10,000 bonus, and you've got 50,000 in RSUs, residual stock units, and or equity. And so, Levels FYI is a really great tool to get an idea. So this person is 1 year of experience, 0 years at Amazon. 2 days ago, back in, they make 140. 496 just base, but they didn't get any sort of equity. They didn't get any sort of bonus that they've put, right? Obviously, this is dependent on the data that we get. Microsoft backend dev. This person is a female. They are Asian. They don't have any sort of schooling experience, but they could still have some experience, but they got 37.5 of average annual stock. And so then they target bonus, meaning that they hit their specific things, they get 25 grand. So what is equity / RSUs and options? So when you're working at a company, I didn't know this. If you already know this, I'm so sorry. I had no idea, so this is why I tell it. RSUs is a way that they will give you options whenever you sign. So I guess let's just jump into my situation with Twilio. My friend comes to me and says, "Hey, we want to hire you." Great. I look it up and I go, "Okay, great. I want to get paid." I had a dream to make 6 figures by a certain age. And so I said, "Okay, I want to get paid $100,000, but I'm going to ask high, right? And then you always negotiate down." And so I said, "Okay, I want 115 was what I asked for." And they said, "Okay, great." We went through the interviews. The interview process is always pretty long. It starts with a recruiter call. And then on that recruiter call, they will ask you, "What do you want to make?" A mistake you can make is if you tell them immediately what you want to make right there. If you say, "I want to make $100,000, what they then do, because they get a benefit, right? Of, hey, if you hire somebody, but then also they're not paid the highest, right? So it's advantageous for both. They want to get you hired, but they want to save some money as well. So if you out the gate say, "This is what I would like to get paid," and again, this is up to you. This is just my advice. Out the gates, "This is what I want to get paid." You already can cut yourself because the pay band and the and what they were going to be willing to pay for the job offer is much higher, right? And so a really good healthy way that I found, and I think Gray, you use this as well, a really healthy way is, hey, that's a really great question. I know that when we come to compensation, there's a lot of moving factors, because the reality is, right, they might offer really great, they might pay for your healthcare, right? And so like my buddy doesn't make as high of a base salary, but him and his wife's healthcare is just paid for, right? So that's $300 to $500 a month that he makes additional because they just cover it. It's really good healthcare, right? And so a great way to respond is like, "Hey, that's a wonderful question. I'm still don't know every dynamic of this job, what's expected, and what the total compensation package looks like, I think that's a better question that we can have down the line, or a better conversation we can have down the line when I get a better understanding of the role and what is needed from me in that space. They're not going to get mad at that. They've heard that before. But it's a way that you can then do more research, and you can even blatantly ask as you get down there, right? You find out first off, is this a job I want? And you can say, hey, yeah, just curious, like what sort of level is this at? And you can look at then you can look at like on Google level 5, blah blah blah, right? Like you can see the levels, you can understand the different pay bands that way. And so by not cutting your foot off at the very beginning and saying, this is what I want to make, it allows you to make more money, right? Just at the end of the day. And so I did that exact thing. I said, this is, I know that when we talk compensation, it can be quite a conversation. There's a lot of stuff, I need to compare it to my job based on, I'm curious what your benefits is, or how, what your benefits package is, how much is expected from me from that. And so before I give you a number, before I feel comfortable with that, I like to get a better view of the overall picture, and then we can address this again. I did that. And then I got into the interviews where they liked me. And then I had an interview, and then I had another conversation with the recruiter after and was like, hey, great. I really like the company. Can you give me some of this information? And now I actually had questions. What does your package, because it was the job I wanted. What does your compensation look like from a benefit side? What do you guys pay for? They paid $30 a month for books. They paid $50 a month for internet. They paid $50 a month for gym. And it was like, oh, cool. I can go and factor all of this into my total comp. If you're paying for my gym and you're paying for books and you're paying for internet and you're paying for all this adds up to something. So even if the base is a little bit lower than what I was wanting, but then they're also paying for all this stuff, healthcare, stuff like that. It's like, oh, actually my take home is a lot more because I'm not paying for healthcare. It's not always the base, like the big base number, right? There's a lot more to it as well. The second thing they'll throw out is RSUs, and those are residual stock units or equity. And so oftentimes the way it works is, let's say like at Twilio, so let's backtrack. We go through the interviews, we go through all that. I get a call and they say, great, we want to offer you $105,000 and $50,000 in equity, right? Or RSUs. And so the way that worked was I got my base was 105, and then I got 50,000 over 4 years because the vesting is called a vesting schedule. So Twilio had a vesting schedule of 4 years. And so basically what it is, and this is a lot of companies operate the same way, is you don't get any of those stocks, right? So what they'll do is they'll say 50,000, and then they will give it 30 months from your start date, and then we'll find the average stock price of 30 months. And this is all if they're public. So if it's Facebook, if it's Apple, if it's Microsoft, whatever, they give the average price of your stock, or of their stock over a 30-day period, or however they do it, 60 days, depends on your company. And then they say, okay, great, the average price was $100. Then they will distribute your RSUs or your units and say, okay, we said we would give you 50. The average price was 100. That is going to be, what is that, 500 shares. And so then now after 30 days, I've got 500 shares that after 4 years, I will have all 500 shares that I will own. The way that it works typically is that after your first year, you don't get anything. You don't get any of it until you're there for a year. So I left before a year at Twilio, and so I didn't get any of this equity, but it was fine. After a year, you get 25%. Then I think it was each quarter or every paycheck, you got like a portion of that to where over 4 years, you got all of that. This in the industry is what we call a golden handcuff. It is companies will dangle equity and units in front of you, and every time you get a pay increase or every annual, they'll bump you up and add more, but then that is a new vesting schedule. And so all of a sudden you've got $200,000 in stock that you are going to give up if you go to a new job, because it takes 4 years for you to actually get the $200,000. We call it the golden handcuff. And so what you can do, and what I did was like, hey, I'm less interested because at the end of the day, stock is volatile, right? my friend who started at Twilio, when she started, her average price was $450. Fast forward a year, Twilio did not do very well. That's when the market started going down. My stock price was $100. And so unfortunately, all of her stocks, she got like 44,000 or whatever. So she had like 1,000 stock, whatever it is, whatever the number is. Yeah, 1,000. She got, or no, 100, whatever. She got all those, well, only got 100, and then they dropped in price, right? Because they took her main thing and divided it by the average price and said, cool, this is your allocated amount. It's 100. No matter if it goes up or down, this is how much you get. And then it shot down in price. So now her signing equity was worth a quarter of what it originally was. So her 44 turned it into 10, and she still had to be there for 4 years to get all 10, right? And so for me, it was like, hey, I don't want that. I'd rather have a higher base than have more equity. And so they said, okay, great. If we were going to give you a higher base, we have to take that from equity. And that's the way I asked for a higher base. And they said, we're happy to do that, but we'd have to take for other equity. And if we do that, then we have to bump you up a level, right? So instead of going in as an L3, you'll be an L4, which was advantageous for me because they have different levels. And then you have to climb the social ladder. So you have to go from an L3 to an L4, an L4 to an L5. And L5 is like management, right? And that's how it works at Twilio. And so by me even negotiating a higher level, in 1 year, I was eligible to be in management versus if I would have taken an L3, I would have had to take 2 years to be in management. And so when we're negotiating, it's there's a lot of tactics, and I don't expect you all to know this. I'm happy to help you. Just message me on Discord if you ever get in this opportunity or this thing. But the way it works is every quarter, or it depends on your vesting schedule, they will give you stock, and you have that in some sort of, JP Morgan Chase account or Fidelity, depends on how your company does it. Once you have that stock, you can do multiple things with it. You can just keep it and hold on to it, or you can sell it and count it as cash. If you sell it, it gets treated as short-term gains. So you get taxed at like 41 or 44%, versus if you keep it, for a year plus 1 day, you pay a lot lower tax price. So there's a whole bunch of stuff, and I'm not an accountant and or tax expert, so I'm not going to get into that, but there's some arguments for that there. So that is equity / RSUs. These are for companies that are currently public, meaning that they're traded on the stock exchange. Now, if you go into a startup, they might, not all startups do this, not all private companies do this, or not all startups do this, meaning that they've done funding, but they're not public yet. So they've got some sort of seed funding, but they will give you options. And so what these are is options are basically, hey, our price is $1 in 10 years. If we get purchased for $10 a share and you're getting them for $1, you have the option to buy them at $1, even though their value is 10. Right. And so this is why working at a startup can be advantageous, because you can make a whole bunch of money because, like one of my next door neighbor and one of my best friends also works for a startup that he was like number 200. He got a whole bunch of equity, and then his company became a double unicorn, meaning their valuation's over $2 billion. And so just from his equity alone, when they eventually go public, and they will, he will make around $800,000 or $900,000 just based off that. He has to pay his options, or he has to pay like $60,000. And it's all like, it's not like he has to pay cash for it. It's like all done for you. It's to pay 60 grand, but the value of the stocks is $900,000. And so that's how you can become really rich if you go work for a startup. Now, like 73% of startups fail. But that's the difference. So if they're like, oh, we have options, you find out, okay, well, what's your option price right now that I can buy in at? And then, or if it's equity, they're going to probably talk RSUs, and you go, okay, what's your vesting schedule? Options still have a vesting schedule as well. So it's not like they're just automatically given to you. But the nice thing, oftentimes with options, if your company gets bought before your options are fulfilled, then they just automatically get fulfilled. So if your vesting schedule is 4 years, you're at a company for 2 years and they get purchased, you just get everything. You get all 4 years worth, and that's part of the purchase price. Okay. Any questions on negotiation, salary, any of that kind of stuff? and just my last thing is remote work is possible. It's available. It's out there. You can do it. Lots of companies are allowing it. Some of the big stuff ones aren't, but lots of companies are allowing it. Any questions on negotiation or thoughts? Did this help? Was this helpful? Was that just so much information that it was like, oh my gosh?
No, it was very helpful. Yeah, I didn't know all that with the equity and all that stuff. So that was a nice breakdown of, what we can look at,
Yeah,
and no, go for the base.
yeah, yeah. I mean, it depends on what you're wanting, right? If you're with a company that you're buying or you're starting and you're like, oh my gosh, I think this is going to take off, you might want to have equity. If you're like, oh, actually the base is pretty good and I'd rather have this because I think that this, extra $5,000 is going to turn into 50, then sure, like you might want to. And it just totally is dependent on your use case, what you're doing. For me, it was like, hey, cash is king right now. I just want cash. Thankfully, cause I got another person hired, and then now I think the stock's around like $60 a share, 65. So it's like I would have even lost money on mine. So my poor friend who started at 450 is like, that's just overall tough. Um, but yeah, it just depends on where you're at. Again, this is not like, oh, always take base. Depends on what you're at. If you think like my buddy could have taken more options and less base, and that's kind of what he argues now. Like, hey, give me more options because he's gonna make so much money because his company is so popular. And he's like, no, this is we're gonna keep going to the moon. So let's do that. It's a gamble though, right?
Yeah.
Because it could all
Yeah,
crash.
I'm more for the for sure thing. That's
For sure.
I don't know. Like,
Same.
yeah,
Same.
I'm just I want the for sure because like right now we're already looking at another crap with with the ceiling, right?
Yep.
So everything like that. So yeah.
Because we're older, Philip.
I'm sorry?
It's because we're older.
Right?
No, I'm with you.
Yeah. So yeah. But no, I mean, yeah, if you I mean, even if you get a job with a big company, Apple, Microsoft, I'm sure, going for the equity is a good idea.
Yeah.
But yeah, I'm more of the person, I'm like, yeah, I want the for sure thing and I don't want to gamble too much.
Yeah. Absolutely. And it is, again, it totally depends on where you're going, what you're doing. Yeah, big companies do stock splits and you can make a lot of money by doing that. But, you know, again, this is the golden handcuff because they'll always throw more equity. And also just one thing to note, equity's cheap. They can give you tons of stocks because people leave every day and then now there's this pool of equity that doesn't belong to anybody and they're like, oh, I'll throw you another 10,000. That doesn't matter because it's not costing them anything right now but cash, right? So for me that was it. But it totally depends on where you're at, what you're doing. You should always try to negotiate equity if they have it, right? Especially if they're public, you should get equity and you should try that. Especially for these roles. And so asking some of these questions of that, I think can really helpful. I think you guys can do it. Like I think you guys are going to be successful, and I promise you, it is a learning curve. And so even if you get to the moment and you accidentally give a pay range, you're like, oh no, what did I do? You can even, I mean, there's no shame in going back and be like, hey, actually, after second thought, and I did a little bit more research. I see that honestly, I gave you a pay range that was kind of outside of the scope of really what this job and after learning more about this job and seeing really what it entails, I think I'd like to kind of revisit that conversation. That can happen, right? Obviously, it's much better to not have that conversation, but just because you do that one time doesn't mean that it's going to ruin everything. So cool. Any other questions, friends, on careers, on assignments, on anything you need?
I'm all good. I want to say thank you. Thank you, Gray. Thank you, Paul. Thank you, Will. It was a great class. I enjoyed it immensely. Taught me a lot. And yeah, keep up the good work, guys. Thank you so much.
Thanks, Philip. I really appreciate that. You guys have been awesome.
One of my best MERN classes. Sorry.
Facts. Absolutely.
Full class does hold a special place in my heart, though. Full class, it did. I'm not gonna lie.
Yeah. Okay. Well, Well, if that's it, friends, I've taken an extra 30 minutes of your time. For the last time, hope you have a wonderful night. I hope that you are successful. And I think if you persevere, there's going to be a moment you're going to want to quit and you're going to want to say, this isn't worth it. And I promise you, there's a place in tech for every single person. Might not look exactly how you think right off the bat, but with perseverance and just focus on progress versus perfection, I promise you can do anything. So I'm really excited to see what you guys can do.
Awesome. Thank you.
Thanks, guys. Have a wonderful night.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Shoot for the moon, y'all.
Hey,